Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to Posture Under Pressure. Today is Tuesday, September 10th, and I am so happy you're able to join myself and Brooke today for this webinar. Obviously, you are here because you're curious about your posture, and we're going to talk about our posture today in different circumstances and situations that we may find ourselves in. And what that means for us long term and even just how we feel at the end of the day, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in and get started. Actually, before we do that, a few housekeeping items I'd like to address. During the call, we're going to ask that you please remain on mute. Feel free, though, to use the chat box. Brooke and myself will do our best to kind of answer questions as they come through that chat box. And if we have some time at the end as well, we will do our best to answer those questions. And we are always available via email or chat. So if something comes up later that you think of or that did not get addressed, please feel free to reach out to us there. On that note, let's get started. All right, so I'll start by just introducing myself. My name is Stephanie Brunson, and I am an ergonomics specialist and evaluator for HPE. I have worked in a variety of settings. Some of my favorite have been in a manufacturing site and distribution site. It's always interesting to be on site and see people making and building things with their hands and moving things around in warehouses. It's always very interesting to me to see how things get sorted and organized. But I am now working in the virtual setting with our HPE team members for office ergonomics, and that as well is very interesting to me. It's always, in my opinion, interesting to see the setups that we find ourselves in, and sometimes for long periods of time that can gradually lead to discomfort for us. So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about what that looks like and how we can address it. But I'm going to go and turn it over to Brooke so she can introduce herself to you all.
Hey everyone, I am Brooke and I am the fitness contract manager for the health fitness and HPE relationship. So if you are at any of our 5 locations that have staffed fitness centers, I work closely with the program managers that are there. And I've had the great opportunity to work closely with Stephanie for the last few years as well and learn so much from her when it comes to ergonomics and my own setup and the effect that it has not only when we're working, but outside of our desk as well, and the benefit of really bringing your focus and your awareness to that and educating yourself and making those changes. So I've appreciated everything I've learned from Stephanie, and I know every time I attend one of her webinars, I always learn additional information. So really excited to be working with her on this 3-part series. And my role in this is going to be to help just bring out some more applicable tools and examples that you all can tap into when it comes to the fitness side of things. And we know how important it is to strengthen our bodies so that we can reach these postures that we'll talk about today and kind of put those puzzle pieces together. So I'm excited to tie, fitness and ergonomics together. They are so closely related and they can benefit each other tremendously. So I'm really excited for this whole series and to bring some of that information to you guys in a new light.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooke. And yes, on that note as well, I think that, we can only do so much with addressing the position of our body, but after that, we really have to focus on how do we keep ourselves there and stay there as we move through our day. And utilizing the fitness center services can always help tremendously with that. All right, let's go ahead and address our agenda today. So we will be looking at and discussing poor posture. What does that look like? And maybe do we have some of those things in our own body structure right now? What does optimal posture look like? We're going to look at our posture under pressure, so different circumstances and situations we may find ourselves in and how that can make us feel and move inefficiently. And then how do we build a strong posture? So our posture, I like to think of it as kind of that foundation. And we want that foundation to be very strong. And so Brooke will be addressing how do we build onto that strong foundation, that strong posture. And then we'll also be sharing with you some tools that are available to you. So once you have some key points and have identified some whys, you will leave this webinar with tools and next steps on how can I take and maintain the best posture I possibly can. So let's take a look and kind of discuss what is poor posture. And this is where we'll utilize that chat box. So feel free to add in to the chat box when I say poor posture, what does that look like or feel like to you? I'd love to just hear your thoughts. Wonderful, here they come. So hunched over a chair or hunched over standing. Slumping shoulders and back pain. Usually we start to feel some discomfort or pain, rounding of the shoulders, aches and pain, back slumping, slouching. Wrist pain too, yeah. Leaning on your armrest. Oh yeah, I'm I have to catch myself with that one. Slouching, overreaching, wonderful. Right. Neck position, yes. These are all amazing. You all are very smart. I can tell that you've been to some of these webinars. But we can take a look here at an image that I like to think of when I see poor posture. And you can see that this individual looks like he's actually kind of like succumbing to gravity here. He almost looks like he's coming to the floor, right? So he has his head really hinged forward, looking down at the floor. Putting a lot of strain on his neck. He has his hand on his phone, so his elbow is bent as well. I know someone mentioned wrist, but we have that elbow bent, kind of shifted over to one side, his right side there. And he's leaning forward. You can see that his upper back is arched as well. So when you think about gravity and where gravity is in this picture and how it is pulling, that force of gravity pulling on the body, we start to increase the weight and pressure through the spine. And so we want to think about how can we best position ourselves so that gravity is not pulling us down, but that we're using the strength of our muscles to keep our posture upright, right? And so that's what we're here for today. Some of the consequences that come into play when we maintain a posture similar to that picture or similar to the comments that you've posted in the chat, when we have poor posture, we start to increase our discomfort and fatigue. So at the end of the day, if you were to check in with yourself and you just say, you know, how are you feeling today? A lot of times people who have poor posture are going to experience quite a bit of discomfort and quite a bit of fatigue very quickly. And we're also going to experience a decrease in our efficiency, so the way that we move through the day. Our flexibility and mobility will also decrease. You may start to experience some issues with balance because you have started to kind of rely on one side over the other. And then if you have to catch yourself, you may find that your balance is not as steady. And then also bodily functions. So I noticed we put a lot of slouching or slumping over. If you were to think about your lungs and the lung capacity, when you are slumped over like this, you're closing off quite a bit of space that you could have in the lungs and your lung capacity. And that also has to do with the digestive system as well. So when we're slunched over, we're kind of crunching everything down, right? So we want to think about opening up that space and letting things move easily through the body. All right, let's go ahead and take a look now at optimal posture, what that looks like, what that feels like in the body as well. I know that growing up as a kid, I remember my mom would say, okay, go stand against the wall, see if you can stand up really straight, and you press your body against the wall, right? And so if you were to think about that, pressing your body against the wall, that's actually taking and pressing some natural curves out of the spine. And we want to avoid that. because those natural curves of the spine are very helpful to us. We have 3 natural curves in the spine, and they're identified as the cervical spine, the thoracic spine, and then the lumbar spine, which is the lower back. You can see them in this standing position here, 1, 2, 3. Or if you'd like, you can give yourself a little neck rub and maybe a little low back rub as well. Those natural curves help to distribute the weight that we are experiencing through gravity evenly through the body. So we have little discs that are in between each vertebrae in our spine. And when we take that natural curve and we kind of exaggerate that curve in one direction or the other, we start to press down on those discs, and it puts a lot of weight and strain and pressure on the spine. So when we are standing or seated, we want to think about making sure that we have those natural curves in the spine and that they're not exaggerated. So a few key reminders when you're thinking about your posture, whether standing or seated. We want to think about aligning our head right over our shoulders. Our head weighs quite a bit of weight, and anytime we shift it forward and down, that weight intensifies, and we want to make sure that the shoulders are holding up that head and that supporting the weight of the head. So ears over shoulders is kind of my cue, or chin parallel to the floor. Long and tall neck and back. So if you were to imagine kind of like a book on top of your head, we don't want to let the book fall or shift over to the right or left. We want to stand up tall. And as soon as we lengthen out, you can think about those little discs between each vertebrae lengthening out, giving yourself a little bit of space in those little cushions. Shoulders, they should be back, relaxed, and down. Okay, so often when we are slouching or leaning forward, those shoulders will naturally tend to kind of curl forward. So a few times throughout the day, reset your shoulders, lift them up, roll them back and down. If you want to do that here and now, you can. Giving yourself, again, that strong foundation for the head and neck. And then the knees, if we're standing, we want to make sure that they're slightly bent and that the core and glute muscles are engaged to maintain a neutral pelvis. So if you want to put your hands on your hips, you can kind of shift forward and back, and you can find those exaggerated curves in the lumbar spine when you rock the hips forward and back. We want to find a center point for those hips. Okay. All right. So as we move through here, we are going to take a look at some additional benefits to our optimal posture. So we kind of talk a little bit about, how we're going to feel and the fatigue that we experience if we don't have great posture. But there are some other benefits that maybe you may not be aware of. So we know that we're going to increase our movement. Our movement's going to be safer. And we're going to decrease our risk of injury when we maintain optimal posture. But we can also see a decrease in some of our stress hormones. They call it power, like a power posture or a power pose. But standing really strong can help us to feel comfortable, to feel confident, and we can start to see a decrease in our stress hormones. Our risk tolerance actually goes up, so we kind of start to feel a little bit more confident in our abilities to take on a little bit more stress or to handle stress. We'll start to see an increase in our confidence and also positivity. And then again, improvements in productivity and focus. So we're going to be less productive. We're going to feel more fatigued with inoptimal posture. With that optimal posture, we'll start to see an increase in our productivity and our focus will go up as well. So these are some of the whys that we want to maintain optimal posture. I would definitely love a decrease in my stress hormones, my risk tolerance to go up, and confidence and positivity. I could always use an extra boost of those throughout the day as well, right? All right, so this graphic for me is a very powerful graphic. And as you look through this little chart here, you'll see that these are typically positions we would find ourselves in throughout the day. Hopefully, we're finding ourselves in this standing posture, 100%, or this seated posture, 105%, where we're reclined back for most of the day. However, often we find ourselves in this position of slumped over, which is 185% pressure on the lumbar disc of the lower back. Every time I look at this, it is my reminder that I either need to be standing up at some point of the day, if not most of the day, or if I am seated, to make sure that I'm seated back into my chair, that my shoulders are connected to the back of that chair. Now, I am a human, and naturally I start to lean forward because I experience gravity like everyone else. But having that in mind helps me to remember that if I stay in this position, I'm going to start to feel really bad at the end of the day. I'm going to feel really tired. I don't want to feel like that when I get done with work. And so I'm going to lean back, or I'm going to stand up and take a break. Two other points that I'd like to just point out here is the recovering and the sleep position. You can see that when we are resting on our back, that is the absolute best position we can be in for our low back. So if you do experience low back discomfort, I encourage you to at least start by sleeping on your back. You may shift through the night to get more comfortable, but some of that time should be spent on your back, laying down flat. And then if you do have to sleep on your side, make sure that you use a pillow between the knees to help support optimal posture while you are sleeping and resting. All right, so for some of us, we may have children or grandkids or even ourselves. We may be heading back to school. And so I wanted to kind of throw this one out there to you all, just as a reminder that if you're working, let's say you're working 40-hour work weeks, right? And you're also doing some school time after work or before work or on the weekends, you want to make sure that you are taking lots of study breaks, okay? So maybe getting on the treadmill with, your note cards or a book and just flipping through to read. Making sure that you are taking study breaks or encouraging the people in your lives who may find themselves in this frame of time of life for themselves, to make sure that they take those breaks, because they will increase their productivity and their focus. They will decrease their discomfort as well. And we all could use little energy boosts throughout the day, right? Also, something to think about is backpack fit, size, and weight. Um, Especially for growing spines, we want to make sure that the shoulders are holding the weight of that backpack appropriately. So making sure that the books are not too heavy, and that the size is fit to the body well, so that it is carrying those backpacks well. And I know that maybe you have experienced this before. If you are holding a big, heavy backpack, you start to hinge forward, right? And that is a lot of pressure on the low back. And if you're doing that for long periods of time, we know that that's going to start to increase our risk of injury as well. So just to kind of throw that out there as we all kind of see kids and maybe even ourselves heading back to school. So on that note, I am going to flip it over to Brooke so she can talk to us about how do we build onto our strong posture once we have found that optimal posture.
Awesome. Thanks, Steph. I know that lumbar disc graphic that you showed, that one always just cements in my head. So thanks for bringing it to my attention again. All right, guys. So I'm going to talk through how we can build the strong and optimal posture that Steph's been talking about today. And what that's going to include is training our muscles to be able to support that posture. So there's two main things that we'll talk through today. The first is called mobilization. So mobilization, we're going to address short and tight muscles. And what I mean by short and tight is typically those are the muscles that are overactive. Those are the muscles that are basically taking the brunt of supporting our posture when we're seated, when we're standing, when we're moving, really no matter what we're doing, there's typically muscles that are overactive. And this comes from those postures that maybe we are repeatedly sitting or standing in. So these are the muscles that are the ones that are contracting and supporting the postures and movements when we actually want a relationship between muscles, multiple muscles that will work equally as strong to help support us through those postures or movement patterns. But again, we usually have some shorter or tighter muscles, and mobilization is that tool that you can use in order to start to correct that and improve your capacity to move and perform a bit more efficiently. So the second bullet on here, you'll see the most common way to mobilize a muscle is through self-myofascial release. This is also known as SMFR. Some examples are using a foam roller, a lacrosse ball, a massage ball, tennis ball, or even massage guns. These have become a lot more popular, and these are great tools for that as well. But the last bullet there, you'll see the biggest takeaway for mobilization is that it gets us into more of an optimal position. And again, I'm referring to the posture. As you sit at your desk, as you stand, as you work out, as you do all the things, we don't want to forget about it when we move from one task to the other. But that takes time, right? So we have some resources for you on the next slide that can help you to practice, and you can just start to integrate that mobilization or some mobilization techniques. So on this slide, you're going to see a bunch of the common areas that typically need mobilization. And I will say everybody's body is a little bit different, but I wanted to highlight a starting point for you all. So if you currently do not do any kind of mobilization, this is a great place to start. These are typically the areas that are taking over, those muscles that are taking over and helping to support our movement patterns or our postures throughout the day. So I know Steph already talked about the low back. I'm sure most of you won't be surprised to see low back listed here. The low back commonly takes a lot of the brunt, right? And not only just the spine, but also the muscles surrounding the low back. And I'm specifically referring to the QL muscle or the quadratus lumborum. This area can get really tight. So whether you're seated or standing, you can practice a little bit here. I know Steph had us do this as well. If you put your hands on your hips and start to tip forward and back, a lot of times when we talked about that slouching being that common bad posture that we all feel a lot. In order to compensate for that, a lot of times our hips will dip into that forward, that over exaggerated forward tilt or an anterior tilt. And when we're in that, the low back, the QL muscle starts to get really tight and shortened. And then you also might notice some other area of the body that feels short and tight when you're in that anterior tilt. That's usually your hip flexors or your quads, so the front of your body. So both of those areas can commonly get really tight when we're in that anterior tilt for a longer period of time. So we want to mobilize those areas to help to bring it back to a healthy length and a length of that muscle that is more efficiently used too. Another area for common tightness and for similar reasons are your upper traps. And you can go ahead and just reach your right hand across to your left upper trap. You might even feel that it's pretty tense and tight. But then similarly, your chest or your pectoral muscles, these can also get very tight. So these are, again, two other common areas that typically need to be released and mobilized. And then lastly, the front of your neck. So your scalene muscles, these are smaller muscles that run down the front of the neck. And the reason, that the upper traps, the chest, and then the front of your neck can get tight for a lot of us is because of what you guys mentioned at the beginning, right? That slouching, that forward head position. I find myself doing this a lot, right? So these areas can all get shortened and tight. So these mobilization techniques can help to get us back to just a more neutral position. But there is also another piece to the puzzle that I'm going to cover next, and then it will all kind of make sense because there's this mobilization portion, but then on the next slide, you'll see there's also an activation portion. This is going to help us to find that balance in between. Activation is going to address weak and underactive muscles in the body. Again, we talked about typically there are muscles that are going to take over and more readily support posture, but there are also muscles on the other side that we want to be helping out to support those overactive muscles. But they're kind of turned off, right? They're kind of weak because those overactive muscles are always taking over. So these weakened and underactive, they don't really have to do much, right? But they are meant to work just as much as those overactive muscles. So we want to be able to practice waking those muscles up so that they're more likely to fire when we need them to, right? While we're at our desk, while we're working out, while we're doing whatever we're doing, we want to be able to find that balance and that equal integration of both muscles. So the name, hopefully is self-explanatory. Activation is going to help correct muscles that are underactive. And without that correction, there's potential for poor movement that we've talked about today, for increased stress and for increased injury. So the last bullet on here, and this, if it helps you to remember, what we like to say is that mobilization gets us into position or into that optimal posture, and then activation is going to help to keep us there. So just like we provided for mobilization, I have some videos for activation that you all can practice. These again are common areas that usually need activation, and you'll find that it's kind of the opposite side of the body from those muscles that are typically overactive and need that mobilization. So if we think back to mobilization, we targeted commonly the low back, the hip flexors. In activation, we usually want to be able to activate the abdominals. So again, kind of opposite side of the body to the low back. And then if we think about hip flexors and quads, mobilizing those, we want to be able to activate the glutes. So typically core and glutes are a little bit sleepy, a little bit weak. We want to be able to turn those on so that we can best come into that neutral position and then transpire into that best posture. So very similar when we think of upper trapezius being overly tight. Lower trapezius or middle trapezius, center of our back, is typically underactive. When we can activate this, it's going to help to open the chest, right? We talked about kind of the chest caving in, very common. If we're able to activate the back of the body, it's going to help to draw the shoulder blades back and open through the chest so that we're not as caved in there. Same goes for lengthening the muscles in the front of your neck and then helping to strengthen the back of your neck. You'll see the suboccipital here in that video. It's going to help to, again, as Steph mentioned, bring your ears back over your shoulders and find that more neutral alignment. So I really encourage you all to check out these videos. Most of them are just around a minute or a little bit less, but these are great techniques that you can have a solid starting point and then, just start to use these in your routine. If you guys have further questions on these, you're always welcome to reach out to myself or anybody else on my team and we can help to, just create something if you're looking for a larger list of exercises or anything of that nature. All right, I know we've got about a minute or two left. So last slide here, I'm going to move through pretty quickly. These are all different tools that you have access to as a fitness center member or just as an HPE employee. So the first one is CubeFit. If you have not participated in CubeFit before, I highly suggest doing it ASAP. This is a free benefit to you, and these are 10 or 20-minute movement breaks that we do right over Teams. So very similar to this webinar, we'd be presenting just for 10 to 20 minutes, but it's going to be a movement break. So the high priority classes that I suggest if posture is your main priority would be desk stretch. These are daily. ErgoFit is hosted on Wednesdays. We have 2 mobility classes, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday. And then we also have strength classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So this will help to mobilize and help to activate and give you those good reminders throughout the day of coming into that proper posture. Next on that list, ergonomic evaluations. So Stephanie Brunson, who you've heard from today, she is the ergonomic consultant for HPE. She is fantastic to work with. If you have not gotten to do that one-on-one yet, I highly suggest that. And then along the same lines, there is an ergonomics training that HPE has created, so you can check that out. Both of those links will direct you to the correct resource so that you can get signed up for those. And then the last 3 tools on here, there are free on-site group fitness classes at our Andover, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Houston, and Roseville location. So if you're not yet a member of those locations, but you do report to that site, definitely go see the program manager at the fitness center. They can get you set up for group exercise classes. You'll notice in all of these classes, they talk about activating and mobilizing and bringing you into a proper posture prior to actually adding load or resistance during your workout. So it's another way to just cement that into your routine. And then lastly, Wellbeats and Headspace. These are two app benefits that you have. You have free access to them through HPE, so you can find the links or the details to get signed up for those from these links. And I highly suggest both of them, especially the Headspace meditation. As Stephanie mentioned, breathing is so key, and using our full lung capacity is so key to feeling our best, but also it has a huge connection to posture and vice versa. So this is a great way to enact on that as well. All right. And I think that's it for tools. I know we brought you right up to the half hour there, but thank you all for attending. And I don't know if there's any questions. I haven't checked the chat box yet. Yeah.